Ask Tom on Home Show.
Mark from Cinco Ranch has a question about spray-on radiant barriers.
Yeah, he wants your advice up front, Tom. Mark writes to us. He wants to know how effective is spray-on radiant barrier for a 30-year-old house. His house is 2 stories, about 4,800 square feet. The roofs are fairly steep, 1 over 8, and good access at most of the attic. And what about his detached garage that's not cooled and heated? Should he bother putting it on there? What say you, Tom?
Well, first off, putting it on the garage, yes, it's the only insulation product that ever works on a non-cooled or heated room. It's even used in horse barns and animal areas because it stops the radiation from coming in, which means kind of related to standing under the shade of an oak tree in a very hot day. You go out in the sun, you're burning up. You go under the oak tree, you go, hey, this feels much better. And that's exactly the feel it will give you. So do the whole structure that if you can get to it, the answer is yes, you will have benefits to it. Now, secondly, the question says, would it work on a 30-year-old home? So I listened to these questions very carefully, and I don't care if it's a 100-year-old home, 30-year-old home, or a brand new home, radiant barriers work. If your house is out in the sun, you're going to have the same effectiveness on an old home as you would on a new home. And even in a storage shed, for that matter, it would work. My detached garage, I went up there and sprayed it just to cool it down a little bit also. It will do some good, and it's very little expense and time to do it. But as far as that goes, a radiant barrier under the roof deck that covers your home, which is air conditioned, you're looking at about a savings of cooling costs of about 8 to 12%. That's a real number. So you'd have to dissect in how much electricity it breaks down to your cooling cost. Everybody thinks that's the only thing that uses electricity is my cooling. No, there's a whole bunch of different things that uses electricity in your home. So there's a percentage of it. But that's a good savings for what little investment you have. And radiant barriers pay themselves off very quickly in certain parts of the country. You wouldn't use it in Chicago. You certainly would use it in Houston, Cinco Ranch being close enough. So it would work very well there too. So my answer is yes, do it. Go ahead if you have access to the garage while they're up there. Another half a gallon of paint, not a big expense. Another 30 minutes, no big deal. Get it done. And yes, it will be beneficial to all homes. That is sitting out in the sun, which pretty much is all homes in Houston.
And I hear you talk, for all the years we've sat together, the radiant barrier is one part of your triangle of protection for your house, and it's all passive. You want to walk through the other two?
I'm definitely a passive guy, especially when it comes to any kind of systems. Anytime you turn something on, I don't care if it's the remote control for your TV, not that I'm getting up anymore to turn my TV on like the old days and turning that. I have a remote control too. But the fact of the matter is it's using electricity. So why have a power vent when you can have Mother Nature do it herself? The 3 ways heat transfers is convection, conduction, and radiation. We just covered radiation, which is the majority of the heat gain on a home. In fact, 80% of the heat gain through the attic is radiant heat. And 80% of the heat gain on an entire home is through the attic. So you can imagine the numbers you'll have to extrapolate a little bit, but they will come down, but it's still pretty intensive. Conduction is hot touching cold. When it gets nothing in between, that R value that we talk about on the floor of the attic, it's going to move heat very quickly, and that means in the summertime, it's going to heat up the inside of your house, what cuts through the radiant barrier. So then you have the insulation. And when it comes to ventilation, it's not really cooling the attic. It's a secondary effect because it's just important when it's 30 degrees outside and you live in Alaska, you still have ridge vents and soffit vents. It's to release the moisture. So in a freezing climate, you don't have icicles growing in your attic. And in a very hot climate, the insulation stays dry. It doesn't have all that humidity because hot air holds more water than cold. And so as the hot air slowly goes out the ridge vent, it absorbs all the water too. So your insulation stays dry, and that R value stays working to its full capacity. And of course, the radiant barrier is usually the missing link, and that's the most important link of the 3.
All right. You got a question? Tom will help you with all your missing links. Go click on that Ask Tom button there at HomeShowRadio.com. Fill out the form and send it in. You can send us, by the way, video question or written it down, but fill out the form and include a picture because that helps us understand and do a better job. And that's what we want to do because your question answers many for others too. We're in it together. And that's why you'll find it at HomeShowRadio.com's YouTube channel. You'll find it on our Facebook page, and we post these every day at HomeShowRadio.com.